Well, good morning. This is Ian R. Crane, and it's a absolutely glorious morning here at Kirby Misperton in North Yorkshire. I've just changed my angle slightly because the sun is absolutely blasting through. So if I am in my usual position around here, then unfortunately, half my face is in light and half in dark. Some might argue that that's more appropriate, but anyway, so we'll just come round this way a bit. But yesterday, of course, I was at the Royal Courts of Justice in London with Joe Boyd and Joe Corrie, and as I explained in the live stream with Joe Boyd and Joe Corrie yesterday morning, after the Justice Morgan had issued his ruling, yesterday was effectively the day in which the corporatocracy in the face of INEOS established that they have precedence over all other British law. So despite the fact that in the past there have been other industries that have met with opposition that haven't had social license, there certainly hasn't been any industry in the UK that has met with such universal disgust as the unconventional gas industry. And the good news is, of course, that it's brought communities together probably like nothing since poll tax. And the more that people do their own research, the more they realise that basically this is an industry that has no place in their community, and certainly really not anywhere across the country. And the north of England very specifically is under attack. Now, by my rough calculation, there's some 13 million people that live in the, or very close to, the licensed areas right across the north of England. So that's, be generous and say that's 20% at the minimum of the UK population that are effectively living in a sacrifice zone. And despite the evidence presented to Justice Morgan a little over a month ago, or not even a month ago, about 3 weeks ago, wasn't it? Then he basically says, well, you know what? Go swivel, because it doesn't affect me. I don't live in those areas. And so despite the opposition, despite the fact that it's very clear that democracy has been completely ridden roughshod over, particularly in Lancashire, where the county council, of course, rejected Quadrilla's application, but overridden by Saeed Javid at central government. Here in North Yorkshire, unfortunately, the planning committee cowed to the threats that were put to them by the government's legal teams, stating that if they did reject this, then they might be personally liable for any losses that Third Energy, BARCLAYS Bank, incurred. And so it was passed, I believe it was 7-4. So here we are. First day of the UK being in a de facto fascist state, i.e. government by the corporations. Now let me be generous here. Maybe, just maybe, Justice Morgan is playing a long game here. Because Justice Morgan, I'm sure, was put under enormous pressure by the government's legal representatives and no doubt the Lord Chancellor. And he has effectively, of course, granted them free access to anywhere where INEOS want to establish a pad. And he basically, what he said is that any form of physical opposition, i.e. slow walking, lock-ons, any kind of obstruction of the highway, any kind of obstruction of premises, truck surfing, will now be effectively not only a criminal offence, but it'll also be contempt of court, contempt of the injunction. Well, let me tell you, on the basis of yesterday's ruling, I absolutely have contempt for the court, because this is a contemptible ruling. But like I said, maybe Justice Morgan is playing a long game, because he's going to know fine well that that ruling is going to be appealed, and ultimately it will be appealed all the way to Strasbourg. And even if we're out of the EU, then it will be an ongoing case, so the likelihood is that it will still have access to the European courts. And of course at that point, then in theory at least, it should become enshrined in British law, because that's what Theresa May has stated, that basically all existing European legislation, European court rulings will be enshrined in British law at the moment of Brexit, if that ever happens. So that's where we're at right now. Now, it doesn't in any way affect what's going on here. And as you see in the description of today's live stream, I've said this is Barclays Bank. And we have to get into the habit of not referring to this tin pot cowboy outfit as Third Energy, whom nobody's ever heard of. It's Barclays Bank. If Third Energy was 97% owned by INEOS or BP or Shell, then we'd be talking INEOS, BP or Shell. We wouldn't bother referring to this tin pot outfit Third Energy. And this is 97% owned by Barclays Bank. So this is Barclays Bank that are looking to initiate the fracking process right across the whole of the north of England. And you and anybody else that is watching this, and anybody you know, please encourage them to let Barclays Bank know precisely what you think about this abomination by doing whatever it is that you think appropriate at your local branch of Barclays Bank on Saturday the 2nd of December. Now, we know that the Saturdays through December, the town centres are absolutely rammed with people starting at least the browsing process for their materialistic Christmas. So it's a great opportunity to get the word out to the wider community that Barclays Bank are on point here in North Yorkshire to start this fracking process, this abomination that will eventually or potentially subject some 13 million people to the horrendous effects that this industry has proven to have caused anywhere where it has become established around the UK. Now, hopefully, Barclays Bank will screw up, just as Quadrilla did, just as Rathin Energy did at West Luton, because the track record of this industry is absolutely atrocious. So there's a good possibility that they will screw up in some way, shape or form, and that will at the very least lead to yet another moratorium and kick the can down the road a little bit further. So the other factor is, of course, that it's still strangely silent here, which is truly wonderful, because that means that Greg Clark still hasn't signed off on Barclays Bank fracking here. And so the crew here, the FRACK crew, will be holed up somewhere in North Yorkshire, and it would be an absolute travesty, of course, if Barclays Bank hadn't housed the FRACK crew in Lorraine Allinson's holiday cottages, because she has been the sole mouthpiece, with the exception, of course, of the local MP, Kevin Hollinsnake, but she has been the sole mouthpiece for this industry here in North Yorkshire, and it would really be somewhat remiss of Barclays if they hadn't housed the FRACK crew in her holiday cottages. But maybe she's getting her benefits in some other way. So, assuming that Greg Clark is still deliberating, or his team of specialists are still deliberating over the plethora of documentation and information that has been put in front of them, and it has been, I understand, suggested that if Greg Clark does sign off on this, then there will immediately be a legal challenge against Greg Clark, on the basis that, at that point he is solely responsible. He's putting his neck on the block, and he will effectively be the one that is liable for any damage that does occur as a result of this. And as I've said, the prospect of that is quite significant. Now, let's assume that Greg Clark does succumb to all the pressure and sign off on this. So that's an opportunity, potentially, for the percentage of those 13 million people across the north of England who are potentially going to be living close to a fracked well site to come along here to Kirby Misperton. There is nowhere in the north of England that is more than about 90 minutes travel to here, road conditions permitting, of course. So, for the sake of a 90-minute journey or less, you get the opportunity to come along and witness exactly what is potentially destined for your community or very close to your community. So start thinking about it. Start thinking about your trip here to Kirby Misperton. You know, it'll still be probably less people than come to Flamingo Land in the course of a day, and I can understand that some it won't be necessarily much of an attraction. But if you want to know what you're up against, and if you want to know what's being proposed for your community, then this is definitely going to be the place to be. Now, you know, we must assume that Greg Clark isn't going to give Barclays Bank the nod on the quiet, and that there will be some due warning. All you need is 90 minutes or 2 hours notice to get here, and then, I mean, it'll take the FRACK crew that time to get everything set up, at least ready to flick the switch and start pumping the first stage of the test FRACK here. So there's your game plan. Get here, or get to Barclays Bank on Saturday, December 2nd, and help get the word out of what's occurring here. And bear in mind that thankfully Justice Morgan's ruling did kick into touch the application by INEOS to shut down all dissent on social media. And you know, the judge was sort of playing it down a little bit on the basis that, well, you know, INEOS haven't actually demonstrated what constitutes harassment. You know, they made a few generalizations, but you know, he wasn't about to, in his words, write a blank check. So that part of the ruling has been completely dismissed. Or I think he used another term like not ordered or something of that ilk, but it's pretty much the same thing. So consequently, you can say what you like on social media, and you know, Tom Pickering looked decidedly uncomfortable yesterday. Now, you know, through the course of this year, we've seen Tom Crotty retired from INEOS after having his butt wiped by Dennis May, who absolutely destroyed him in a debate in Nottingham, which I had the good fortune to attend. Dennis May did an outstanding job of literally showing that Tom Crotty had no right to be anywhere near his community. And Tom Crotty, I think, was you know, a dead man walking from that moment. And then literally a couple of months or so ago, INEOS's PR guru, Peter Riley, announced that he was going to seek his fortune elsewhere. And I think that was pretty much in the wake of the Scottish announcement that fracking was effectively banned north of the border. So Tom Pickering, dead man walking? Quite possibly. Certainly, if INEOS lose the injunction at the appeal, or even at a later stage, then I think Tom Pickering will literally have shot his bolt, and will probably be seeking his fortune elsewhere. So it wasn't a great day for democracy yesterday, but like I said, you know, maybe there's a deeper strategy here, and you know, we do get the opportunity to absolutely enshrine some of the things that, you know, perhaps we've taken too much for granted in the past, and absolutely get them enshrined in our law, or not. We can't guarantee that that's going to be the outcome, and that's why it's so crucial that people do get involved. And you know, the one thing I can categorically state, and I've already said that I hold yesterday's ruling in absolute contempt, and I know that there will be many others around the country who do exactly the same. And of course, the whole idea here is to scare people into doing nothing, not taking any direct action, either on the base that they're going to lose their liberty, or INEOS can come after them for costs and losses. Well, you know, getting blood out of a stone is a bit of a tough one. So, you know, I'd look forward to another opportunity to challenge this industry in the courts. I'm not necessarily going to initiate that myself, but I am more than happy to respond, as I have proven last year. And there are many, many others who are prepared to do that also. So, you know, let's not look at all the negatives here. It's a great opportunity to really show the wider community what the real agenda is, to establish this totalitarian corporate state. And then last night, on the way back from London, I was reminded that there was an event in York yesterday evening at the Quakers Meeting House, and it was part of their Peace in the Community series. And yesterday evening the discussion was fracking in the community, and in particular the outrageously aggressive policing of this activity. And I'm going to post some of the video from last night. I was actually asked by one of the panel, who was actually one of the Quakers, if I would film it. I hadn't gone along with the intention of filming it, but I did film it. And I have to say that Bishop Graham Cray's contribution, and Bishop Graham Cray is a resident here in Kirby Misperton. He's owned a property here, I believe, for some 20+ years, and has been a permanent resident here since retiring from his formal ecclesiastical duties for the last 3.5 years. So perfect timing, Bishop, you know, to come here just as this was kicking off. But I have to say, your contribution at the meeting last night was truly outstanding. And sadly, the youngish police superintendent that was sent along, who had never been to Kirby Misperton, which is why they allowed him to go along, and he spoke in generics, and basically he was completely out of his depth. And when I actually asked what the attitude of the police would be to the Justice Morgan ruling, all he could do was waffle, but basically said that the police will do whatever it is that they're told to do by their hierarchy. He tried to allude at one point that the police officers still have a responsibility for independent thought, but we know that that doesn't happen. In fact, I was sitting through an IPCC hearing last year, or yeah, I think it was early last year, and during the course of the hearing, one of the officers being questioned was asked about this, whether or not they would ever reject an order if it was passed down, and he said, well, in theory yes, but it will never happen. And so this police superintendent, who was fast-tracked into the role, he's ex-military, just 3 years in the police, but really he was somewhat out of his depth last night. So anyway, I may show some of the footage of him, but it's not really that relevant. The crucial contribution last night was Bishop Graham Cray, and you know, he's often down here at the gates, and did not hold back in making it abundantly clear that he was disappointed and appalled by the way in which North Yorkshire police have policed this operation here at Kirby Misperton. So, still all to play for. I know some people yesterday were really down after the ruling, and that's understandable. But, you know, hey, listen, there's a lot of creativity here. This is a very broad community, and there are people in this community from all walks of life, people from all political persuasions. In fact, there may be not many other things that, you know, everyone in this community agrees upon, other than the fact that this industry, the unconventional gas industry, is an absolute abomination and has no place in this country. So that community, I think, will grow, and I think that there are people who perhaps hadn't previously looked at this, but after yesterday's ruling are realizing that actually they need to get involved, because if they don't get involved, then their right to protest in whatever it is that, you know, they're trying to prevent may be removed, because that's clearly what the purpose of this really is. Now, the good news is as well that I don't think that yesterday's ruling will particularly motivate the likes of Barclays Bank or Quadrilla or iGas to initiate their own proceedings. This is still too much in the balance, and I think there's a very good possibility that as this escalates up through the legal process, it will be shut down. But like I said, don't bank on it. We still got to get involved. Now this afternoon at North Allerton, on the north-western corner of the North York Moors, and this is the seat of the county council, but the local new suffragettes, as they call themselves, will be marching on County Hall. and apparently they're meeting in Northallerton at 12:15. Northallerton's not that big a place, so I'm sure once you get to Northallerton you'll be able to find where they're congregating, but they will be marching through the town to County Hall and effectively trying to ask the question that they tried to ask in Moulton at the regional meeting last week, but were refused, and the meeting obviously was subsequently adjourned. So that's this afternoon, Friday 23rd, I think it is. Is it 23rd, 24th? I've lost track of days of November. And then of course over the weekend there will be still some monitoring going on here at the gate. There's work to do at the camp, so if you do feel that you want to contribute to the opposition here but don't want to get directly involved in that opposition, then please do come down to the camp and help us out. Obviously we're dealing with a lot of mud at the moment, and as it's warming up I can feel what was solid ground a few minutes ago actually softening up beneath my feet. So anyway, we're not going anywhere soon. We will be giving you updates. Hopefully, I don't think I'm going to go to Northallerton this afternoon. Too much to do on the camp. There will be other people there, hopefully live streaming, and I'm sure there'll be updates on Twitter and on the Kirby Misperton Protection Camp Facebook page. And really a final appeal as well. Obviously the community here is growing. We have quite an infrastructure on the camp. There are things that need to be maintained. So at the top of the Kirby Misperton Protection Camp Facebook page there is a PayPal account, and if you could make a small, or not so small maybe, a donation to that, it would be very greatly appreciated. Meanwhile, if you're not at Northallerton, or you're not able to come here over the weekend, please think about coming down next week, especially if you hear that Greg Clark has finally signed it off. Meanwhile, let's put it out there. Let's just visualize the fact that, you know, maybe all this equipment leaving the site because Greg Clark has in fact refused to approve a cowboy operation that is almost wholly owned 97% by Barclays Bank, are not fit for purpose and should not be doing what they're doing here or anywhere else. So thanks again for following me during the course of this week. Oh, we've got a convoy coming in already. Looks like they're topping up their tankers. So this is obviously getting down before the school run, although I thought it was 8:30 to 9:30 that they weren't supposed to be bringing vehicles in. But looks like 2 tankers with at least a 3 police vehicle escort, I think. Anyway, the day starts. So hopefully see you next week. So thanks very much again for joining me, and please share this not just within the anti-fracking community, but whether it's my videos or the work of Fargo McCann, Maple, Indie Media. They're doing a sterling job in getting the message out of what is occurring here. So thanks again. Take care. Have a great weekend.